This is Biology 2, Chapter 14 on the history of life. In part 1 of this video lecture, we will be discussing fossil evidence of change. Well, if we're going to talk about fossil evidence, we're going to have to talk about kind of the Earth's autobiography, if you will. Earth's early history. The oldest rocks, continental rocks that we have on the planet have been dated around 4.6 billion years old, give or take a little bit. So the very earliest of Earth, we're starting at the very beginning, rewinding back quite a few billion years. Remember from 9th grade science that the Earth is a sphere, and the reason for that is that semi-fluid or fluid materials in a microgravity environment will be attracted to each other, and the easiest molecular structure for them to do so is in a sphere. So gravity pulled the molten Earth, kind of chunky salsa-like Earth, if you will, and the heavy materials sunk into the center, so all of the metallic materials of the inner and outer core are on the inside of the Earth. Then the lighter, fluffier silicate minerals are found in the upper and lower mantles and the crust of the Earth. So baby Earth, very early Earth, there was not much of an atmosphere at all. It was very toxic. There was no types of weather activities, there was no precipitation, and no life. So at the very beginning, we have the formation of our solar system. Our sun formed first, and the planets formed later. We fast forward, chunky salsa Earth forms. We have lots of comet and asteroid impacts from all of the space junk in our solar system as the solar system kind of calms down its activity. Fast forwarding a little bit more, the earliest of Earth atmospheres were produced by the volcanoes of the Earth producing gas. It's a method called outgassing. So basically our first atmosphere was made up with all gases that were actually locked inside the Earth's crust. So at this time, there's still very little or no free oxygen available. Free oxygen meaning kind of breathable oxygen, oxygen that living organisms would use. Lots of toxic stuff in the atmosphere. Remember, most of what volcanoes put out of their gas is carbon dioxide, CO2, and also a lot of water vapor. Carbon monoxide is another gas that's found, as well as different compounds of hydrogen and nitrogen. Sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and hydrogen cyanide are also very prevalent in gases from volcanoes. So now we're going to super duper fast forward up to actual fossil evidence. And the only physical evidence that we have that other things have existed on this planet is the fossil record. Now the fossil record is not perfect and it's not complete, but it is the only physical evidence that we have that things have existed on this planet in ancient times. A fossil is any preserved evidence of an organism. It doesn't have to be a bone, but in most cases your traditional fossils are. Most organisms never get to become a fossil. It's actually a pretty miraculous event. In order to become a fossil, you have to not decompose and rot away before you fossilize. So there has to be a deep burial in sediment, most likely, and that will seal off oxygen and other gases from, and bacteria as well, from getting in to decompose the actual hard parts of an organism. Not to mention that every single thing that's on this planet right now that's living doesn't necessarily have bones. We have things like jellyfish and the like that don't have any bones. Not to say that they couldn't become a fossil. They certainly could, and there is fossil evidence of jellyfish. They get pressed into very soft and squishy sediment, and the sediment hardens and forms a cast or a mold of that jellyfish. But organisms need to be buried very quickly in order to form a fossil. Here are some different examples of fossil types. Again, they don't always have to be bones. We can have trace fossils, things like tracks or footprints. Molds and casts, like I discussed with the jellyfish. So a mold is an impression of an organism, and then a cast is a mold that's filled with sediment. So a cast is kind of a 3D image, where a mold is kind of a two-dimensional image pressed into a surface. Replacement often happens in critters with shells and the like. So the original organism is replaced with mineral crystals. Petrification or permineralization. A lot of times this happens in wood. So empty pore spaces are filled in by minerals. Amber is another variety of fossil. This can trap insects or tree leaves or seeds or other tiny organisms. The guy from Jurassic Park with the mosquito in his cane, that was an amber fossil. And sometimes we can actually be lucky enough to find original material. Mummification, drying out, or freezing can preserve actual original organisms. So if you remember, pardon me, if you remember from 9th grade, fossils form in sedimentary rock. So those minerals replace the organic matter, or they fill in empty spaces. And paleontologists are those folks that are kind of ancient life biologists / geologists. They study fossils in the environment that they were found in. How do we know how old a fossil is when we get it, when we find it? There's a couple of different methods. Relative dating is used out in the field. It compares rocks and other layers. Relative dating gives kind of a ballpark estimate of the age of whatever it is you found, whether it be a rock or a fossil or an object or maybe some type of event. So relative dating just gives a general perspective. So from the diagram here, I know that my little trilobites there are older than the little clamshell doohickeys up on top because they were further down. So there are some kind of rules to help paleontologists relatively date objects. The law of superposition in geology states that older rock is on the bottom and younger rock is on the top. So a fancy translation of that is the further down you have to dig, the older something is, which makes sense. The further down something is found, the longer it's been buried. However, we need a little more accurate types of ways to date a fossil. Radiometric or radioactive, or sometimes it's called absolute dating, gives radioactive isotopes to give an accurate age. Remember, isotopes have an unstable nucleus. And the nucleus doesn't like to be unstable, so it shakes and throws off extra particles that it has received, which is why it's radioactive. So it decays at a very constant rate. And scientists use that decay rate almost like a clock to see how old something is. So with my example here, I knew by superposition that the trilobites were older than the clamshells. But now I know that dating the layers of volcanic ash between the layers of those two objects, I can age my trilobites between 545 million to 520 million years ago, and the clamshells are younger at 510 to 495 million years old. And the way that paleontologists do this is using the half-life. The half-life is the amount of time it takes for half of a radioactive isotope to decay. Carbon-14 is a fairly popular radioactive isotope that is used in newer living things. The half-life of carbon-14 is 5,730 years. So if I had 1 gram of radioactive carbon-14 in 5,730 years, half of that would turn into nitrogen-14, and the other half would remain carbon-14. The geologic time scale is kind of like Earth's autobiography. It shows major geological and biological events in Earth's history. It's kind of like a book, and as a book is divided into chapters and pages and paragraphs and sentences, so is the geologic time scale. So we're going to take a very quick drive-by highlight tour of some different eras and periods of the geologic time scale. The Precambrian era. This is most of Earth's history, 90% of it, as a matter of fact. Basically, the only living things that were on the Earth at this time are single-celled bacteria. We do have fossil evidence of these little critters living in rocks that are around 3.5 billion years old. The Paleozoic era. Paleo means old. Zoic refers to life. So the Paleozoic era, we see the Cambrian explosion. There's a major diversification of animal groups during the Cambrian explosion. At this point, all life is in the oceans. We have lots of shelled, kind of primitive organisms. There are some examples of actual fossils on the right, and on the left is a diagram, of course, an artist's depiction of what life could have looked like in the Paleozoic era. During the Ordovician and Silurian periods, we have fish, land plants, and insects appearing. Again, some Ordovician fossils are on the right, and an artist's depiction of what life could have looked like in a glimpse is on the left. In the Devonian period, we have the first tetrapods evolving, or four-legged creatures. Reptiles and amphibians kind of dominated the Devonian era, or period rather. During the Permian, we have a major mass extinction occurring. The evidence leads to kind of a lot of different things that contributed to this. Mostly it was volcanic activity worldwide, as well as the continents are starting to kind of break up from Pangea, which is causing different types of climate in different areas. 90% of life at this time became extinct. But as the Earth always will, it always recycles, it heals itself, and it goes on, and that includes the life as well. So during the Mesozoic era, we see the very first mammals, which were very small and kind of mouse-like. The very first dinosaurs are appearing as well. They were rather small and lizard-looking kind of critters. Flowering and non-flowering plants also came during the Mesozoic era. The Jurassic period, we have dinosaurs ruling, predatory dinosaurs. Birds are also evolving from those predatory dinosaurs as well. Archaeopteryx is the organism there that's on the right, is the first feathered dinosaur that has been discovered. During the Cretaceous period, about 65 million years ago, there is evidence of an asteroid impact on the Yucatan Peninsula. That is the most likely cause of the mass extinction of the dinosaurs, which was good because then this allowed in the Cenozoic era mammals to become the dominant land animal. So mammals begin to diversify. We came out from our underground burrows and caves and begin to fill the niches that were kind of open from the dinosaur mass extinction. So in the Cenozoic era, we see the first horses. We see the era of the large mammals, such as the saber-toothed cat and the woolly mammoth. Australia and New Zealand even went under their age of mammals. We have there the giant kangaroo. So in the whole wide grand scheme of things, we can take a look at this kind of from the bottom to the top, with the oldest rocks being around 4 billion years old, the oldest fossil cells being around 3 billion years old. Eventually we get eukaryotic cells around 2 billion years ago. We have there the Precambrian era. You can see all the different little fossil critters. The Devonian period there, you can see the fish. We have during the Jurassic and Triassic of the dinosaurs, zipping around to the Cenozoic era of the mammals, And there at the very end of the line is us with our feet dangling on the edge.